Okay, welcome everyone to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're digging into a really interesting stack of sources that landed on our desk, all focused on the crypto market, looking at around June 12th, 2025.
Yeah, we've got stuff from CoinMarketCap, some Glassnode analysis.
Right, plus expert takes and other market news.
Exactly. And our job really is to unpack all this, try to cut through some of the noise, and just pull out the most important bits of knowledge.
We want to help you connect the dots between these different perspectives,
Yeah.
looking at everything from big market moves down to specific data points and what individual projects are up to.
And importantly, based only on what's in these sources we have in front of us.
And it's a fascinating mix looking at this stack. Almost seems contradictory in places.
How so?
Well, you see mentions of market downturn.
Yeah.
But then right next to that, there's some intriguing data signals popping up.
Okay.
Plus news about a company making a pretty significant Bitcoin buy, and then all this chatter about, a potential altcoin season.
Ah, right. So a bit of everything, definitely complex.
So yeah, let's get into these sources and try to explore what's really going on beneath the surface.
Sounds good. Let's start with that contradiction you mentioned, the market dip. Several articles touch on this. Coinpedia News, for one, they explicitly talk about why the market was seeing some downward pressure today, according to their report.
And they point the finger, well, pretty squarely outside of crypto itself, don't they?
They do. The source says a slide in traditional markets, yeah, it specifically mentions the Dow, S&P 500, NASDAQ, that this triggered a wave of panic selling in crypto.
Interesting. So the volatility spilling over.
That's what the source suggests. It draws a direct line. It reports the global crypto market cap falling, 1.68% to $3.39 trillion?
Yeah, something like that.
And daily trading volume also dipped 5.27% to about $133.8 billion. So according to this source, it wasn't necessarily something inside crypto causing this specific dip.
It was Wall Street jitters, essentially.
That's the argument presented here, yes.
Okay, so you have the market getting pulled down by, traditional finance wobbles. But then, and this is where it gets interesting, other sources in our stack seem to paint a totally different layer. Something suggesting underlying strength, maybe, despite these short-term dips.
Absolutely. If we kind of zoom out a bit, still based on these sources, there's a piece from coindu.com quoting the Bitwise CIO, and he says something pretty significant.
Which is?
That corporate Bitcoin adoption is just beginning.
Huh. That feels like a weighty statement, doesn't it? Especially right after we talked about a market dip caused by potentially traditional finance panic.
It does. And the expert quoted, he apparently says corporate interest is growing because traditional cash management strategies are, losing their appeal in the current economic climate.
Ah, so companies are looking for alternatives and Bitcoin's on the radar. That's the idea.
That's the idea presented in that source, yes. Which raises a really key question these sources make us think about, right?
Which is, how do we square these things? These short-term price drops may be linked to TradFi fear.
Right.
With this longer-term story from experts in our sources talking about more corporate adoption. A fundamental shift in how businesses might view assets.
Exactly. How do those two things sit together?
And it's not just expert opinion in these sources, is it? We actually have a concrete example of that corporate adoption playing out.
We do. There's an article on CoinMarketCap, originally from CoinCu, it looks like, reporting that a company called ANAP made a notable move.
Yeah, buying 50 BTC. In just 2 days, it says.
That's a very specific, tangible example, backing up that broader point about corporate interest. The source is clear. This purchase brought ANAP's total Bitcoin holdings up to 153 BTC.
It's just one company, sure, but it's a data point in these sources that kind of supports the idea that some corporate entities are actively accumulating, maybe looking past the daily noise.
Yeah, perhaps taking a longer view.
Okay, so we've got external market correlation causing dips, but also corporate players maybe accumulating for the long haul. What about the blockchain data itself? What signals are coming from there, according to these sources?
Right. Well, one of the articles references Glassnode data. It's Bitcoin World published it.
What does it suggest?
It highlights that recent analysis from Glassnode, the on-chain data platform.
Right, looking at transactions, wallets, miner activity, all that public ledger stuff.
Exactly. That analysis suggests key signals are present for a potential. Well, they use the phrase explosive surge in Bitcoin price.
Wow, okay. Does the source say which signals?
The excerpt we have doesn't detail the specific on-chain signals, unfortunately. But the core takeaway presented is that underlying network activity, according to Glassnode via this article, is showing bullish potential building up. sort of beneath the surface volatility we've been talking about.
That is really interesting. So blockchain data hinting at a surge happening while the market's dipping due to traditional finance links, and companies are still buying.
It's definitely a complex, layered picture these articles are painting, not straightforward at all.
Truly is. Okay, let's pivot then,
Mhm.
because there's another big area these sources cover, altcoins.
Yes, the alts. Several articles discuss this space, including this idea of an impending altcoin season.
Right. CoinDo.com has an article titled specifically, Is Altcoin Season 2025 Around the Corner?
Mhm.
And it seems to focus on the altcoin season index as a key thing driving this discussion, in their reporting anyway.
Yeah, and the source explains this index, right? It tracks the percentage of altcoins, basically, anything not Bitcoin that have outperformed Bitcoin over the last 90 days.
Okay.
And the article states that if this index crosses a certain point, often it's cited as 75%, it signals that, broadly speaking, capital is flowing more heavily into alts than into Bitcoin.
Which could lead to a period where altcoins generally do better than BTC.
Potentially, yes. A
We'll
sustained
see.
period. And according to this article, key indicators within that index are signaling a potential breakout towards that state.
Huh. So while Bitcoin might have its own potential surge signals, according to Glassnode in one source, there's separate data focused purely on the altcoin market, suggesting maybe these smaller coins are positioning for their own run relative to Bitcoin at least.
Seems that way, based on this report. And the sources also mention some specific altcoin projects that are making moves.
Yeah, I saw that. A Coinca article highlights BlockDAG, reporting quite a significant fundraising haul for them.
Yeah, $298 million raised. That's what the source says.
Wow, $298 million. That's a massive number for a project, as reported there. The article also mentions its price, 0.0001 TEED currently.
And a pretty impressive ROI noted 2,678% for early participants. It positions it as a top pick in that specific source.
Right. That kind of it suggests significant investor confidence, at least from those who participated in their funding rounds.
Definitely suggests interest. And that same article, it also briefly mentions Stellar XLM and Avalanche, AVAX, kind of referencing their price outlook and action.
Maybe just for context or comparison against BlockDAG's performance in that piece.
Could be, yeah. Just noting their presence in the market alongside BlockDAG.
And then there was another project mentioned, Hello Labs, in a piece from BTC Wire.
That's right. This article announces some major upgrades to the Hello Labs token economy. It's not just a small change either.
What's the core of it?
The source highlights the introduction of something called a burn and earn model.
Burn and earn. Okay, how does that work, according to the article?
Well, it says it's designed to strengthen the long-term utility for their Hello token. Typically, a model like this means tokens get removed from circulation, burned through user activity or some mechanism.
Right, reducing supply.
Exactly. While participants are simultaneously rewarded, maybe in the same token or something else, the goal is usually creating scarcity while also incentivizing people to participate.
Makes sense. Does it mention anything else?
Yeah, the source also mentions a deflationary structure overall and a multi-chain bridge being part of this upgrade.
Ah, multi-chain. So the token could be used across different blockchains.
Potentially, yeah, increasing its reach and utility.
Okay. So within the altcoin space, just based on these sources we're looking at, we see different things happening.
Yeah, different narratives. You've got projects discussed in terms of huge fundraising and early ROI, like BlockDAG in that one piece. Others, like Hello Labs, seem focused on evolving their core token mechanics, with features like burn and earn and multi-chain.
And then others like XLM and AVAX are just sort of noted for their market position in that article that focused on BlockDAG.
Exactly. A real mix of activity and focus within the altcoin sector itself, as presented here.
So pulling all this together, this deep dive, looking at this range of sources, market news, expert takes on corporate strategy, specific company buys, on-chain data hints, altcoin project updates, it really does give you that multifaceted view of a crypto market right now, doesn't it?
It really does. We've touched on the volatility, possibly linked to traditional market.
Right, but then the counterpoint, continued corporate interest,
Yeah.
backed by specific examples like ANAP.
And those data signals hinting at future upside potential from the Glassnode analysis mentioned.
Plus, the whole distinct world of altcoins, with signs of maybe collective movement coming, alongside very specific project developments, like BlockDAG's raise or Hello's tokenomics changes.
It really shows the market isn't just one single thing. Even when prices dip due to outside factors, according to these sources, there are other signals, actions, developments happening underneath.
Which could be significant for understanding the underlying trends and maybe future potential based on what we're reading here.
Exactly. It's not just about the headline price.
And that's really the aim of these deep dives, isn't it?
Yeah.
Helping you quickly get informed by pulling these different pieces together, seeing how they fit, or sometimes how they seem to conflict.
Absolutely. Helps you look beyond just the daily chart and understand some of the forces being discussed in these reports and articles.
So maybe here's something to chew on as you process all this information from the sources. Given that the market is showing this correlation with traditional finance right now, according to some sources, and we have that expert opinion saying corporate adoption is just starting, how should we interpret the short-term volatility, like the dip we talked about?
Versus those longer-term trends and signals.
Yeah, exactly. Versus those longer-term trends and maybe signals like the altcoin season index potentially ticking up.
It's a fascinating interplay, isn't it, between these different forces described in the sources?
It really is. How might that interplay influence the market moving forward? Definitely something to keep in mind.